Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 453 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is accountability. Our quote of the day comes to us from Bob Proctor. Accountability is the glue that ties commitment to the result. I hope your 2024 is off to a fantastic start. If you are looking to hold yourself more accountable, either personally or professionally, you can take a look at our brand new Clear Planner. Think calendar, planner, journal, and goal and habit tracker all in one. You can get yourself a copy or download a free sample by heading on over to theclearplanner.com. I know you're going to enjoy hearing from our guest today. Dylan Conrad is a very successful business coach as well as a podcast host. He delivers a ton of value, and I know you're going to enjoy today's episode. Dylan, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Heck yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it, Chris.
Appreciate you being here. I had the privilege of recording first on your podcast, so I'm excited to return the favor here. And the first question we ask each guest is if you're ready to positively impact at least one person today.
Heck yeah, man. That's why I do what I do. I wake up every day. That's what gets me out of bed, gets me moving in the right direction. So absolutely.
The theme of our podcast and our company, No Quit Living, is to motivate and inspire our listeners and our clients to never give up on themselves. So I'm curious if you have a no-quit story yourself, or perhaps a really challenging time where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
I mean, I have a million. First one that comes to top of the mind is, so I've been coaching for about 16 years, and I personal training and then big box gym, rented space, and then I opened my own gym, which was like my dream. I had this studio. I'm in Los Angeles, so I was in Brentwood, if anyone's out there is familiar or listening to this. But I had this studio, 1,500 square feet, packed to the brim. It was awesome. Had full sales manager, operations manager. I had 7 coaches. It was like pumping in there. Pandemic hit, right? So no one could come in there. I'm in LA, so like we had the strictest lockdowns, and I thought a lot of during that time where I couldn't get anyone in. I'm like, man, maybe I should just throw in the towel and switch careers. And I was getting a lot of outside influence, a lot of talking heads saying, oh, maybe you should move over to banking. My brother-in-laws are in banking, and I was just like, that'd be too easy. That'd be way too easy. And, I do this because I'm passionate about it. I love fitness. I love helping people. I love nutrition. I love transformations, but not just like the physical part, but the mental part. So for me to keep going in that and completely pivot my business, I'm so thankful I did it. And now I have about 14 employees. We have about 160 clients. Everything's pumping, getting great transformations. And I couldn't be happier that I saw that and really pushed when I didn't want to.
I think it's so powerful when I ask this question because it really opens up the guest and their story. And I did not know that backstory about what led you to this place in your career. And during this pandemic, the last 3+ years, I think so many people were able to, and I say were able to, not like they were lucky, but they found it within them to make a pivot or a switch or a change. And I do a bunch in sports and the fitness world as well. And a lot of my friends were in familiar situations that you were in. And so many of them either completely shut down or had to restart. But many of them were able to pivot into this online world. So I really appreciate you sharing that. The question I ask, and I want to give you a chance, is if you could just tell our listeners very quickly who you are and what you do, because I think nobody tells their own story better than themselves.
Yeah, so my name's Dylan Conrad. I'm the owner of DC Fitness. We're an online transformation coaching company. So we do one-on-one nutrition, everything's customized, accountability coaching, training programs, and we will work with people that want to not just change their physique, but really change their life and use fitness and nutrition as kind of a launching point to get more out of their life. So yeah, that's kind of that's the breakdown of what I do and who I am. I'm a dad. I have a 4-year-old, and we got 2 twins coming in April. So that's exciting as well.
I knew you were a dad. I did not know the 2 additional were coming in April. So congrats on that. But you
Thank
said
you.
something that I'm glad you did, because I was going to ask you either way. When I was on your podcast, we talked about coaching and different things, and you had mentioned, I think at least 2 or 3 times from your business, the accountability coaching, which everything we do is hashtag accountability. I love that. So I want to take a deep dive just into what it means to you, or what does your accountability coaching consist of? Because I think it's something that can be used in all businesses and areas of life, not just what you do.
It's honestly the backbone of my program, because before I had the accountability coaching portion, which I started in gym about 2016, 2017, the before and afters and transformations we were able to get, and sustainability was nowhere near it is today. And there's a reason that it is the most beefed up part of my program. The nutrition plans, obviously customized, the training programs, but at the end of the day, it's like, if you don't do it, and if you don't do it in a way that's going to fit into your lifestyle, you may see results or not, but you're definitely not going to keep them. So what we have found is, because with our accountability coaching and how we've laid it out, having weekly calls or having someone to just message is great. But what we're finding is a lot of people will give them the plan, and then they'll kind of life, forget about it, right? So what we do is we actually check in 5 days a week. We're looking at food, we're looking at workouts, we're looking at sleep, steps, any lifestyle targets, water supplementation that they need to check off, and giving feedback. And the power is really having someone expect things from you, and having that mentor, we were talking about yesterday on the podcast, having that mentor mentee communication, right? So the coach is here expecting things from you. The client, obviously wants to fulfill on their promise and get the coach's expectations and meet them, right? So accountability is everything. That is like, we can give you the best training and nutrition plan, but yeah, it's the accountability that is the backbone to this system. And I really believe that it's backbone to any system that you want to have success with and make a real change and put yourself in the best position to succeed.
I appreciate you touching on that, and I was really curious to hear your perspective on that, because again, I've known you for a while now, and having had a couple conversations, you had mentioned that, I think last week when we first spoke, but when you interviewed me on your podcast, you mentioned it a couple times. And I'm going to take just a stab in something that I talk about in regards to accountability, and the idea of results versus temporary success, and then temporary success versus sustainable success. And to your point about nutrition and fitness, if you stick to a program somewhat, and you stick to a nutritional guide somewhat, you're going to see quote unquote results. But will they be the results that you really and truly want, versus really and truly putting in the effort and being accountable? And we talked about it yesterday. It's not about being perfect. And I think you would agree, or I'm curious, but I believe you would, that your successful clients, I don't think they've ever come back to you, and whether they work with you for 3, 6, 12 months and say, hey, Dylan, I just finished the first 3 months of the coaching program, and I was absolutely perfect for every single day, every single hour of every day. But I would confidently say that those clients that have had success and it's been sustainable, they have been extremely consistent, not perfect, but with that accountability coaching, they can make those adjustments along the way.
Absolutely. And so there's like, I call them cyborgs, right? The clients that just, you give them the plan, they execute it to the T perfectly for about 3 to 6 months. Then you have the grit. And the people that are the cyborgs have a ton of grit, ton of grit. But then it's like that step down where they get hit in the mouth, their kids get sick, they get thrown off their nutrition, or they miss a workout. But the next day, and you said it so well yesterday, you're like, don't miss more than one. And I think that's so important because if they get off track, the grittier clients, the ones that have endured some true hardship before they even came into our program and gotten through it, do way better because they have that grit muscle. And so, yeah, the clients that keep it the most long term are the grittiest, and they kind of keep going when they get hit in the mouth, when they don't, it's not perfect, and they just look at it like progress and just like chopping wood. There's nothing sexy, unfortunately, about fitness and nutrition. Like everyone wants to look at like that's the next new thing, but it's like if it's boring, that's great. That's like where I want to get all my clients to because boring works, right? It's like they do a ton of research on that too, with like the people who eat pretty much like the same 8 to 10 meals every single week, lose weight and keep it off for a good. So it's all really just about like finding that boring spot, whatever that is, and getting comfortable with that uncomfortable, right? We talk about pushing, we always talk about, I listen to a ton of your podcasts, doing something hard, doing something that really challenges you. And a lot of times people just can't sit with themselves. They can't sit with the boredom. And so really like leaning into that boredom and that monotony, like David Goggins was saying on Huberman, it's like, that's what's really gonna build your discipline muscle and keep this sustainable long term.
I wrote and I circled boring works twice, and I have a bunch of stars next to it. It reminds me, a very short story, but a gentleman by the name of Alan Stein, who's a very well-known speaker, he used to be in the basketball world, and he had an opportunity to watch Kobe Bryant work out at like 4 a.m. before one of Kobe's camps that Alan was working at. And after the workout, Kobe came over to him and said, "What do you think?" And Alan shares this, and it's his story. He can tell it way better. But the gist of it is, he said, unbelievable workout, Kobe, but if you don't mind me asking, you did so many of the fundamentals over and over again. And he said, Kobe looked at him and he said, "Why do you think I'm the best basketball player in the world?" And the takeaway from the story, and like I said, Alan shares it way better. And he actually shared it one of our first 30 episodes, but it's being obsessed with the boring and the basics, because before you can be great and do, the deadlifts of 400, 500, 600 pounds, you still have to do the first deadlift of 135 and then 225. And I think it's looking at that amazing, but then saying, okay, to get there, I need to be able to get to first base, then to second base, then to third base. I'm having a different little change with some of the questions we ask, but wanted to ask you if there's anything personally or professionally that you're perhaps struggling with right now that maybe, might connect with one of our listeners.
Yeah. Personally, I mean, you want my list? I mean, every day it's like, so right now, business wise, I have 14 employees and I feel so removed from all of them. And as you kind of scale up and you move away from the employees that I have, the quality of the work, it diminishes, right? Which is expected. And so I'm really, what I'm doing with that struggle is implementing better systems, better checks and balances with that. But that's one thing professionally I'm struggling with. One thing personally that I'm struggling with is, my wife is extremely pregnant right now with twins. And a lot of times, she's not feeling great. And that can definitely dampen the mood in the household. And, for me, kind of like I have to check myself and be like, this isn't about you, dude. This is about her not feeling great. And so those are just kind of off the top of my head, two things. But I did want to actually fill in because you were talking about Alan Stein, his name is,
Yep.
and watching Kobe Bryant. So I got a great Steve Nash story. So When I was growing up, one of my best friends, his dad was actually athletic director of Pepperdine. Pepperdine is a private college out in Malibu, and they play Gonzaga, they play Santa Clara. There's kind of in that same division. So I'm a ball boy, and I was I don't know if I mentioned that. So my best friend's dad was the athletic director. He got us jobs as ball boys. So we'd wipe up the sweat, all that stuff after free throws, rebound for the team when they were warming up. And I'll never forget. So Pepperdine was playing Santa Clara, and do you know where I'm going with this? So Santa Clara, and this guy was just he was everyone went out, went back into the locker room, and this guy had been out probably 2 hours ahead of the game. That's where we have to arrive. And he was shooting with the team. The team went back in the locker room. He's still out there shooting. And I remember thinking, like, this guy's shooting the same exact shot. He was shooting a three from the corner, and I was rebounding for him. And I'm like, dude, this is so boring. Like, kept passing, but his consistency and got better over the stream of him shooting. Anyways, so the game starts. He goes, finally goes back in the locker room. Game starts. Every second of the game, 3-pointers, Steve Nash, 3-pointers, Steve Nash, because he was just doing the boring work. And when everyone went back into the actual locker room, he was still out there just shooting. And obviously that was a shot he was not hitting well. And he hit a ton of quarter threes in that game. So funny Steve Nash story I just want to bring up.
So full and fair disclosure to our listeners, Dylan and I have known each other for a bit. I had no idea that you, A, were a ball boy, and B, had a great Steve Nash story, which is even better because I shared a story that wasn't mine. You had a story that was yours. So I love that. And the reason I love that is because nothing is better than stories. That's why podcasts are famous. That's why movies. That's why books. And it's, are we willing to learn from those stories? And I posted something, I think it was maybe a week or two ago, the idea of simple versus easy. And I think it's really simple to understand the work, the extra work. What you talked about, your Steve Nash story, but it's not easy to do it, right? It's simple to understand if you're falling short in an area of your life, personally or professionally, you need to do more or get help or get a coach. That's simple to understand. It's a very simple concept. Okay, I need to do more of this or adjust this or get coaching or training, but it's not easy to do. And I think going back to my point a couple minutes ago, from the highlight reel, it looks sexy. And to your point about nutrition and fitness, it's not sexy. Maybe the end result is when you've lost a bunch of weight, you feel good, you look good, but that entire middle part, it's hard, it's ugly, it's repetitive, and to use the word we both said, it's really boring. And you mentioned some of the most successful clients that you have those same 8 or 10 meals, and they eat them over and over again. And I always equate it to bodybuilders, because when you look at them preparing for a contest, it's beyond boring. It's like, I have 1.5 scoops of this at 10:12 a.m. and then at 12:16 p.m. I have 2 scoops of this. And when you look at it, you're like, okay, that I would never want to do that. But then you look at the end result and you say, I want that, but you can't have the end result without all that boring in the middle.
100%. And you know who does the best in bodybuilding? Ex-military. There's like a very high population of ex-military. If you look at the military, how they lay it out and how they teach you, it's boring. It's repetition. It's, like the day, like, you do this at this time, you do this time. And they get like, some people get like dopamine hits from it. Just like, oh, this is like scheduled. And that's my theory, at least. So, it's definitely that boring mindset that they kind of instill in you in military. It actually works very, very well in terms of getting more out of that military group, but also like whatever they do in their life afterwards. And that's why there's so many successful bodybuilders that are ex-military. I thought that was interesting. I'll throw that in there.
No, that's a really interesting point. And as you were talking, it made me think of the concept of, there's been a bunch of memes and posts where if you want to perform under the lights, using that analogy, you have to put all the work in, quote unquote, in the dark, when there's no lights on, there's no fans, there's no competition. But the only way you can compete under the lights and against either yourself or the best competition is because you've put in all that time, day in and day out. Changing lanes here for a second, we always look to add value to our listeners. I was curious if you've read anything recently, or perhaps you're currently reading something that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick David, Choose Your Enemies. I just started that. I'm like halfway through his first book, which was Your Next Five Steps. I love him. I was turned on to him by Brad Lea's podcast. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And he started talking about how he's actually like from the same area and I am, and he's like calling these all these landmarks. And he's got a very cool, interesting story, but it's a very big story of like perseverance. He was pretty much nobody and really turned his life around in his mid-20s. And it's really good strategy for, whether you're a business owner, you want to make a change in your personal life, or you want to get healthier. That's a fantastic book. So it's called, Patrick Bet David, Next Five Moves. That's great. And also I was thinking about, like you're talking about, one of my favorite books that I haven't read in a while, I've read a million times because Phil Jackson referenced in his book, is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Fantastic book to just, like you were saying, like you have to be open to learning. Right? You always have to be learning. And it's such a hard mindset, but it's like such a useful one.
Shameless plug for the No Quit Living podcast. We've had both Brad Lee and Patrick Bet David on, which was awesome. So for our listeners, if you want to follow up with what Dylan just said, we had Bradley. He was one of the first, I think, 50 guests, and Patrick Bet David actually was the guest on episode 99. You mentioned something that I gotta ask, and I think our listeners are gonna know where I'm going with this. But you said you've read it a million times. So when did you start rereading books, and do you reread books at different points, or is it kind of just more when you feel you need that book or that idea a refresher?
Yeah, it's more of the feeling of like, oh, I need a refresher here. I'm gonna reread this book. Yeah, and yeah, I started rereading books. Hmm. Yeah, probably after college. That's when I started actually, that's when my real learning occurred. And I was reading a ton of books and a lot of research, and especially with the research, it's very, especially in the beginning for me, it was really hard to understand and read. But once I got good at reading research and kind of going through it a million times and just really understanding it deeply, I was able to adapt that and actually use it to my clients. So that was great. But that's where I first started using it when I guess that was 15 years ago. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's a shorter read. I probably read that about 40 times
Really?
so far. Yeah, it's great.
I've actually never read that book, so I am super grateful that you recommended that. I actually
Yeah.
ordered Patrick Bet David's new book. I think it comes in the next couple days, so I appreciate that. I know you know the famous quote by Jim Rohn: "You are the average of the five people you spend the most time with."
Hmm.
If I could grant you dinner tonight with any five people, dead or alive, that you could level up with, who would you pick?
Kobe number one for sure. When you're telling that story, I was like, I was lucky enough to watch him play, and I went early to that game, so I was able to watch him warm up when he was, again, same like Steve Nash. He was like the only one that was out there. Yeah, I would say, man, this is a hard question. Yeah, Kobe. Um, I would say Phil Mickelson, like golfer, watching him play, incredible. Chris Bumstead, bodybuilder. He's like Mr. Classic right now. Talk about boring. Like, if you've ever watched his stuff, he's like the most monotone guy, but his following is so intense. It just shows, like, boring works. He's consistent with his posting, is consistent with all that. That'd be number three. JFK, for sure. I read his biography. That's intense. That's insane. The Bay of Pigs, like all the stuff that with the Cuban Missile Crisis, like the last second, all that stuff that went down. And then last person just had on top of my mind. Last person. Yeah, probably Gandhi.
I love this question because what I do is I get to learn, and I always think about my five.
Who are yours?
It changes literally every 2 weeks. I think
Yeah.
I don't think I did an exercise about 4 months ago where I actually typed up, and I had a list of, I think it was like 37 people. So
Hmm.
mine continually changes. But what I love about this question is somebody will say something, meaning a name, or they'll talk about a book or something that I hadn't thought about, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I was like, all right, now that person is on my list. But the reason I love this question too is just the way my mind goes is I just literally pictured Kobe, Phil Mickelson, Chris Bumstead, JFK, and Gandhi at a table with you. And I just was like, this would be such a diverse table where it's like, what topic could they all touch on? And the reality is probably
A
none,
lot.
but each of them would have like a very specific comment about something, and all of a sudden it'll just go down to like an amazing tangent where Gandhi will like question Kobe about, how he went so crazy, and just be like, well, what if you took, 2 hours off one day and you just, and it would lead to like a 7 hour conversation.
I feel like it would be they would have nothing in common, so they wouldn't know where to start. But once they start talking, like, greatness and success leaves clues because they probably have a ton of stuff how they got to where they got to in common. So them talking about that stuff, they would go for hours.
You don't think Gandhi and Chris Bumstead would talk about deadlifting, and Gandhi would talk about his PRs?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's like, you know what? Now I'm introduced to weightlifting. Like, let's go. This is personal development 101.
Gandhi would become the all-time greatest power lifter ever just because of that. We're going to change lanes into what we call our hot seat questions, and the only request we have of you is you spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Last meal, what do you pick?
My last meal, man, I'm super but I would just say like steak and a baked potato. I'm like very easy.
Favorite smell?
Favorite smell? Oh man, so you talked about surrounding yourself with five people, right? One of my clients, very wealthy, hedge fund manager, one of my mentors, he has like Aesop soap in his bathroom. It smells like success. I don't know how to put it. It smells like it's like, dang, like, it just makes you want to, I don't know. It's like, yeah, it's very interesting.
Note to listeners, if you want to smell like success, get Aesop soap.
Get $50 soap.
Favorite sport?
Yeah, basketball, the speed of the game. I'm in LA, so I get to watch LeBron and
Sorry to hear that. All-time favorite team?
Lakers, baby.
Favorite movie?
I hate to say it, but I really like Wolf of Wall Street. I think Leo's great in it, and the story is just like it's so slapstick. It's like out of control. He's a really Jordan Belfort, by the way. He writes some good books. He is, yeah, like some good sales training too.
He's a ride. I don't know if you ever saw Total Tangent, but he went toe to toe with Grant Cardone.
I saw that. Yeah, I thought they were gonna do a fight, like MMA fight.
Grant called him out and he's like, "You want to fight?" And Jordan was like, "Yeah, sure." And Grant was like, "No, like really, let's get in a ring or a cage." And Jordan's like,
It's like I got a bad shoulder.
"Do you have an all-time favorite book?"
It's tough. I would say Phil Jackson's book probably is my favorite. I've read that several times.
Favorite app you use on your phone?
Headspace.
Nice. What's the background picture on your phone?
My daughter.
Do you have a all-time favorite quote?
It's one that I made up actually, but I always tell people the more advanced your nutrition and your more advanced your training, the more rapid your results will be.
Ooh, that's a great quote. And what's that one song, no matter whenever you hear it, morning, afternoon, or evening, you automatically just turn it up and rock out to it?
Man, right now it's Let It Go, Frozen. My daughter is in like the biggest Frozen phase right now, and it's a great album. Like I will turn that up and jam out anytime.
My daughter is 12 now. We're very past that, but I have probably 30 videos on my phone where either I'm in the passenger seat or we're stopped and I just hold the video over my shoulder and she's just as like a 2.5-year-old just
Yeah,
screaming, "Let it
the
go."
best.
I don't miss I miss those times, but I don't miss that song because I think we probably
Totally.
listened to it in our house like 16,000 times. Wanted to ask if there are one or two people that you follow on social media that really put out great and uplifting content that maybe you could introduce or possibly reintroduce to our listeners.
Yeah, As far as uplifting, yeah, it is uplifting in a sense because it goes into the science and it kind of just proves what you would think already in terms of nutrition and training. But Lane Norton, great, really, really good account. Puts out a lot of stuff and he debunks a lot of myths, which is fantastic. But yeah, and then in terms of the other account that I follow that's really inspiring, um, Brad Lea's I really like a lot. He's got some really good reels and just overall content and a lot of stuff I agree with most of the stuff. Some I'm like, oh, okay. But I think it's really a different he has a very interesting way of looking at things.
Yeah, he's got some great content. So
Great
what's the
content.
best way for our listeners to connect with you, follow you, but also for any of our listeners who maybe would like to hire you or work with you as a coach? And please also tell them about your podcast as well.
Yeah, yeah. So my podcast, Metabolic AF, I come out with about 2 or 3 episodes per week, all platforms. As far as getting a hold of me, Instagram, I'm probably the most active at Dylan A. Conrad. So Dylan like Bob Dylan, Conrad with an N as in Nancy. And then LinkedIn, very, very active on LinkedIn. Do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, constantly posting new content on there. So I'd say those are the three. As far as the program goes, yeah, we customize everything from like, how long it's going to be for you. My goal is I want each person that comes through the program to take as long as it needs to take, but never have to do something like this ever again. I want you guys to get the skills, create the habit, and be on your way. I want you to think of this as like college. You invest in it, you can ROI on your health the rest of your life. Taking down health insurance bills, taking down life insurance bills, obviously living more, no hospital bills. But yeah, so programs, if you're interested, hit me up. We can chat more about them. I have links on my social media that you guys can check out too and take you through it.
I I love that, and I have to say we've had a bunch of fitness and nutrition people on the show, and I just have a lot of friends that are in that industry. I don't
Hmm.
think I've ever heard anybody answer or say it the way you did. So I just wanted to reiterate to our listeners, and I think it's something that I'm going to steal. So I'm sharing this openly with our
Yeah.
listeners. The concept of teams and companies and individuals that work with me. I'm a big, obviously, believer in system, routines, and habits. And
Yeah.
the hope is that once you put these into play, the right systems, routines, and habits that work for you, you then don't need to repurchase a program like this. You're then
Yeah.
maintaining, and again, you change certain things, but that's awesome. I really appreciate that. And last question we have for you is the same question we ask everybody: is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Yeah, so obviously it's the new year, and I think there's no everyone wants to like bag on New Year's resolutions and don't do it. It's so cliche, but any time is a good time to change. And so if you're feeling it, if you want to make a lifestyle change with your health and nutrition, there are so many things in our lives that we can't control. So many things. But what we put in our mouth and the exercise we do, if we can control those variables, we can control results. So this is definitely within your control. And like I said in the beginning, like if you can get good at this area of your life, really structured and strategic and do this, it's going to pay dividends in every aspect of your life. You're going to see relationships, business, everything just start taking off because it's going to teach you to be structured, disciplined, and be someone who actually sticks with it and follows through. So and when you accomplish it, that feeling, that empowerment, and you're like you realize that you're capable of a lot more um than you're getting right now for sure. So that's what I'm gonna leave off with.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I truly appreciate that. So for our listeners, if you're looking to make that change or make that final change, you've maybe tried this a few times, I definitely would recommend you checking out Dylan's programs. But also, please, if you ever listen to another podcast other than the No Quit Living podcast, you have my permission to listen to Dylan's. But he puts out great stuff. So I know that we will connect again soon. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me on, and listen to the podcast where I have Chris on because there's so many good knowledge bombs in there. It was just like, boom. I'm like gonna have a hard time making those reels because there's just too much. I'm like, oh, that would be good. Oh, that would be good. Oh, that'd be good. There's just too much. So definitely check that out. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for hopping on and for having me on. I'm truly honored. This is an amazing podcast. It was a great experience and asked amazing questions today. So thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to episode number 453 from Accountability, Books, and How Boring Works. I hope you enjoyed hearing what Dylan had to share with us. In his parting words, Dylan shared how any time is a good time for change. I would like to both encourage you and challenge you to make that change you've wanted to make but haven't. The time won't ever be perfect, so why not start today? And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.